The conference room felt like a courtroom. Colton Rivers slid a folder across the table. Screenshots of me entering the Riverside building, time-stamped, tagged like evidence. Your contract prohibits outside work, he said. We've confirmed you're consulting for a competitor. I looked up. I don't deny it. He paused. Expected denial. Bigger. Tears. Not calm acceptance. Then we're terminating you. Effective immediately. I took the pre-signed letter. Fair. I should focus on one job. The silence that followed. Priceless. I packed my things. My niece's graduation photo, my jade plant, my mug that read, "Compliance is just organized paranoia." And the 3-inch binder I'd written myself, because their official docs were garbage. Lydia from accounting mouthed, "What happened?" I just smiled. No point explaining. As I walked out into the Seattle rain, my phone buzzed. Eleanor, Harbor Ridge, board confirmed. Offer stands. Monday 9 a.m. Hope your weekend clears up. I typed back, "Weekend's clear. I'm in. Full-time, effective immediately." 3 years I'd been Vertex's only compliance officer. Paid 40% below market. Worked 80-hour weeks. Flagged a $7 million regulatory risk. And got a good job, while the CEO got a $300,000 bonus. I fixed the problem myself. Over 3 weekends. No help. No credit. I started looking. Quietly. Then I met Eleanor at a compliance conference. She didn't treat me like a cost center. She treated me like an expert. She offered weekend advisory work. No operational overlap, no conflict. Just strategic review of fintech investments. A fraction of my time. Triple my pay. Legally clean. Ethically sound. I took it. And then, because I parked in the wrong garage one Tuesday, they assumed the worst. They fired me for moonlighting. They didn't ask what I did. They didn't care. They just wanted an excuse to get rid of the one person who actually understood their systems. I thought about it for exactly 15 seconds. The money alone would change my situation dramatically. My student loans from law school were drowning me. My apartment was barely affordable. This would provide actual financial breathing room for the first time since graduation. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. But more than money, it was respect. Eleanor talked to me like an expert. Like my knowledge had value beyond just preventing the company from getting fined. Like I was a strategic asset instead of an operational necessity. I checked my employment contract 3 times. Reviewed case law on moonlighting restrictions. Consulted a lawyer friend who specialized in employment agreements. Everything was clear. My contract prohibited working for competing financial services companies in operational capacities. This advisory work fell well outside those boundaries. I accepted. For 4 months I lived 2 professional lives. Weekdays at Vertex, maintaining their compliance framework single-handedly while being chronically undervalued. Weekends reviewing investment opportunities for Harbor Ridge, being treated like the expert I actually was. The contrast was stunning. At Vertex, my opinions got dismissed or ignored. At Harbor Ridge, Eleanor's investment team actually listened when I explained regulatory risks. They asked follow-up questions. They adjusted their strategies based on my analysis. They treated compliance like the strategic business function it should be instead of an annoying speed bump. The work was purely analytical. I never touched Harbor Ridge's internal operations. Never handled compliance for their portfolio companies. Just reviewed documentation and financials for potential investments, flagging regulatory red flags before they committed millions. Completely legitimate. Completely legal. Completely outside my employment restrictions. My niece Sophie noticed the change when she visited in August. "Aunt Kira, you seem different," she said over dinner. "More confident. Less stressed." "Just doing some consulting work," I told her. "Helps with the student loans." He grinned. "Helps that someone actually appreciates you for once, I bet." Smart kid. She'd heard me vent enough times about Vertex's nonsense. The extra income helped enormously too. My law school debt was $140,000. On my Vertex salary I was barely covering interest. The Harbor Ridge consulting fees let me actually make progress. For the first time in years I could imagine being debt-free before I turned 40. But beyond finances, it was the professional validation. Eleanor's team valued expertise. They understood that compliance wasn't about saying no to everything. It was about understanding risk and making informed decisions. At Vertex, I was the person who made things difficult. At Harbor Ridge, I was the person who made smart investments possible. Then last Tuesday, I made the mistake that unraveled everything. Harbor Ridge's offices were in the Riverside Commerce Building downtown. Usually, I parked 6 blocks away and walked, maintaining complete separation between my two professional worlds. Different neighborhood, different routine, no overlap. But last Tuesday, street construction had the usual parking structure closed. I parked in the Riverside Building's garage instead. More convenient. Completely innocent. Except someone from Vertex saw my car. Someone who apparently had nothing better to do than track where I parked and report back to HR with assumptions about what I was doing there. I'd been so careful for 4 months. Varied my schedule. Never mentioned Harbor Ridge at work. Kept every client interaction completely separate. But you develop routines, you get comfortable, and that's when someone decides to become an amateur detective. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 3 years warning Vertex about operational risks. About single points of failure. About what happens when you don't have backup plans. Turns out I'd created exactly that kind of vulnerability in my own life. Wednesday morning, I got the text from Eleanor. Board approved the full-time offer we discussed. Chief Compliance Officer for the entire portfolio. $180,000 base plus equity. Team of 3 analysts reporting to you. Can you start in 2 weeks? I stared at that message for a long time. Everything I'd wanted. Real authority. Actual resources. Compensation that matched my expertise and education. A chance to build something properly instead of constantly patching a sinking ship. I replied, let me give proper notice here. Professionally, I want to ensure smooth transition despite everything. Eleanor sent back, that's exactly why we want you. Integrity matters. I spent Wednesday afternoon documenting every single active compliance matter. Every pending audit. Every regulatory deadline for the next quarter. Created a transition guide that would let even a junior analyst understand what needed handling. They'd ignored my warnings for 3 years. Refused to hire adequate staff despite my repeated requests. Treated me like an overqualified administrator instead of a licensed attorney specializing in financial regulation. But I wouldn't leave them exposed. Wouldn't compromise client interests because management had treated me poorly. The work mattered even if they didn't appreciate who was doing it. Thursday morning started normally. Reviewed overnight alerts. Updated our regulatory tracking spreadsheet. Responded to a question from our loan operations team about TILA-RESPA disclosure timing. At 10:15 Colton called. Kira, can you come to conference room C? We need to discuss something. His tone was neutral but something felt wrong. In 3 years, Colton had never called me directly for anything except annual review scheduling. I saved my work, locked my screen, and walked into the ambush that ended my employment at Vertex Financial. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know because they'd never bothered to actually ask what I was doing, was that Harbor Ridge had 0 operational overlap with Vertex. Different sector entirely. Harbor Ridge invested in fintech companies. Vertex was a direct lender. Not competitors. Not even adjacent markets. But assumptions are easier than questions. And liability concerns trump actual investigation. As I drove away from Vertex carrying my box of belongings, my phone started ringing. Colton's number. I smiled and declined the call. Their problem now. Not mine. By Friday afternoon I'd signed Eleanor's employment contract. Chief Compliance Officer for Harbor Ridge Capital's portfolio. 3 direct reports. More than double my previous salary. Equity that could actually mean something. The relief was overwhelming. Like finally removing shoes that had been too tight for years. I spent the weekend actually relaxing. No emergency calls at midnight. No Sunday afternoon scrambles to prepare Monday reports. Just quiet and rest and the satisfaction of knowing I'd made the right choice. Saturday afternoon, Sophie called from campus. Aunt Kier, you sound amazing. What happened? Just making some career changes, I told her. Good ones. Finally, she said. You've been killing yourself for those people forever. They didn't deserve you. He was right. I'd been grinding myself down. Trading health and sanity for a company that saw me as a cost center instead of the legal expertise keeping them compliant with 14 different regulatory bodies across 7 states. Sunday evening my phone buzzed. Text from Lydia. Emergency all hands Monday morning. Everyone's freaking out. What did you do? I didn't respond. Whatever was happening at Vertex wasn't my concern anymore. Monday morning I walked into Harbor Ridge's offices in a new blazer and actual confidence. The lobby was professional without being intimidating. People smiled, said good morning, treated each other like humans instead of productivity metrics. Welcome officially, Eleanor said, meeting me in the lobby. Let me introduce you to your team. I'd forgotten what those words felt like. The 3 analysts, Hannah, Derek, and Priya, looked at me with genuine interest. Not desperate relief that someone had finally shown up to solve the latest crisis. Just professional curiosity about working with someone new. We've studied your published analysis on interstate lending frameworks, Priya said. Your approach to reciprocal licensing was brilliant. Really looking forward to learning from you. By lunch we were deep into reviewing their current portfolio. They had questions, smart ones. They challenged my interpretations constructively. Built on my ideas instead of just implementing whatever I said without thought. This was actual collaboration. I'd almost forgotten it existed. Meanwhile, across town Vertex was experiencing their first day without me. I didn't need inside information to know what was happening. I'd lived those systems for 3 years. Knew every deadline. Every vulnerability. Every place where my institutional knowledge was the only thing preventing chaos. Monday afternoon would bring the first confusion. Someone would have a compliance question with no one qualified to answer it. They'd check the shared documentation and find it inadequate without the context only I possessed. By Tuesday, small problems would start accumulating. Missed deadlines. Incomplete filings. Questions from regulators that no one could properly address. By Wednesday, exactly 72 hours after my termination, the real consequences would begin during quarterly audit prep. My phone buzzed at 3:47 p.m. Monday. Colton. I let it go to voicemail. Kira, it's Colton. We're encountering some procedural questions about the upcoming state audit. Nothing urgent. Call when you can. His voice was casual. Just minor confusion. I deleted the message. Tuesday brought 6 calls from increasingly senior people. By afternoon the tone had shifted dramatically. This is Gregory. Our audit prep has revealed significant gaps in documentation. The team is unable to locate critical files. Call me immediately. I texted back. I'm focusing on one position now as you suggested. Best of luck. At Harbor Ridge I was immersed in building actual infrastructure. My team and I designed a comprehensive compliance framework for portfolio companies. Best practices I'd only dreamed of implementing at Vertex. Adequate resources. People who understood that preventing problems was more valuable than constantly fixing them. Eleanor checked in regularly without micromanaging. How's the transition? Strange having actual support, I admitted. And being heard when I flagged concerns. She nodded. We've all worked places that treated expertise like an inconvenience. That's why our turnover rate is under 5%. Tuesday evening my personal email chimed. From Gregory, marked urgent. Critical audit in 72 hours. Team unable to compile necessary documentation. Name your consulting rate. Please respond. I closed my laptop without replying. They'd had 3 years to properly staff the compliance function. 3 years to pay me appropriately. 3 years to listen when I explained what would happen if I wasn't there. Wednesday dawned clear and cold. At our morning meeting, we finalized implementation plans for the portfolio compliance framework. The energy was incredible, 4 qualified professionals building something together, each perspective valued. My phone started vibrating nonstop around 11:30 a.m. I silenced it during our strategy session. When I checked later, 31 missed calls. Twice as many texts. From Colton, legal has reviewed your termination. We may have acted without complete information. Please call urgently. From Gregory, whatever your new employer is paying will match it plus 40%. This is critical. From the CEO himself, Donald Ashford, state audit begins tomorrow. Examiners requesting documentation only you compiled. Board meeting this afternoon. Call immediately. I felt no satisfaction. Just confirmation of what I'd warned them about repeatedly. They'd built a compliance function on my shoulders alone, then pushed me away without understanding what would collapse. That evening, driving home from my new office, a news alert flashed on my dashboard. Seattle financial services firm faces emergency state audit amid compliance concerns. No company name yet, but I knew. Tomorrow's headlines would name Vertex specifically when examiners found the gaps. When they started asking questions about systematic documentation failures. At home, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving and sat on my balcony watching the city lights. My phone lit up again. Eleanor's number this time. "Have you seen the news?" she asked. "I have. Your former employer has been calling our main office trying to reach you. Rather desperately." My stomach dropped. "Are they threatening legal action?" "They tried. Our attorneys reviewed everything thoroughly. Your work for us was completely above board. Advisory only. No conflict whatsoever. You're absolutely clear legally." She paused. "But they're imploding. The state audit apparently uncovered significant issues." "Issues I flagged repeatedly," I said quietly. "Issues they chose to ignore. Their disaster is unfortunate but not your responsibility. However," Eleanor's tone shifted. "If you wanted to help them avoid complete collapse, that's your choice. Professional grace can be powerful." I sat with this for a long time. Part of me wanted to let them fail completely. Let them experience the full consequences of treating expertise like an inconvenience. But another part recognized that innocent people, regular employees, borrowers, would suffer from management's failures. Thursday morning, Hannah was waiting at my desk with her tablet. The Vertex situation is all over the financial news. State examiners found systematic compliance failures. Their stock dropped 28% at opening. I felt hollow looking at those numbers. Not satisfaction. Just waste. Waste of talent and resources caused by short-sighted decisions. "They've been calling our office," Derek added. "Gregory Vance personally. Trying to reach you through us." As we gathered for our morning meeting, Eleanor pulled me aside. "Their board fired Gregory this morning. The interim CEO reached out directly. They're offering a substantial emergency consulting fee for audit assistance. 1 week, remote only, no ongoing commitment." I hesitated. "What do you think?" Eleanor considered carefully. "Professionally, helping them doesn't hurt us. We have no competitive relationship. Personally, it's entirely your choice. You owe them nothing." Walking to my office, Priya fell into step beside me. "You know, sometimes the most powerful statement isn't letting someone fail completely. It's showing them exactly what they lost." I stopped. "What do you mean?" "If you help them recover, they'll always know you could have prevented their disaster. And that you were gracious enough to help despite how they treated you. That knowledge changes organizations." I thought about this as I settled at my desk, where my team was implementing the framework we'd designed together. Each person's contribution valued. Each concern heard. I called Donald Ashford back. "Ms. Wallace, thank you for returning my call." His voice was strained. "I understand your company is experiencing some compliance difficulties," I said neutrally. "Difficulties is an understatement. The state audit has exposed systematic failures in our documentation and processes. The team cannot address the examiner's requests. We're facing potential license suspension." I let silence fill the line. "We're prepared to offer substantial compensation for your assistance." "Name your figure." "My consulting rate is $500 per hour. 20-hour minimum, payment in advance. And I have conditions." "Done." "What conditions?" "First, I work remotely. Second, I provide guidance only your team implements. Third, you provide written acknowledgement that I flagged these exact issues repeatedly and they were ignored. Fourth, you immediately hire 2 qualified compliance professionals at market rates. Fifth, you establish a proper compliance budget with board oversight." Long silence. Papers shuffling. Muffled discussion. "Without these changes, you'll be back here in 6 months," I explained. "I can help you through this audit, but fixing the underlying problem requires structural change." We agreed to all terms. "How soon can you begin?" After receiving payment confirmation and written agreements, I spent 40 hours over 1 week guiding their team through audit response. Step-by-step procedures to address examiner findings. Documentation frameworks I'd actually created but that had been buried in ignored reports. Questions flooded back. The team they'd assembled lacked the institutional knowledge to implement without constant guidance. For 40 hours I taught what should have been taught gradually over years. By the following Thursday, Vertex had satisfied enough examiner requirements to avoid immediate license suspension. Too late to prevent massive reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny, but soon enough to avoid complete operational collapse. As our final call ended, I delivered one last message. Every framework you're implementing existed already. I documented these exact processes and flagged these precise vulnerabilities. Those documents are in your systems. Read them. Because sustainable compliance isn't about a single person, it's about organizational commitment to understanding what you're responsible for. 4 months later, I stood before Harbor Ridge's quarterly investor meeting, presenting our portfolio compliance initiative. Behind me, slides showed how proactive regulatory analysis had prevented 3 potential problem investments. Every company believes they understand compliance requirements until proven otherwise, I explained. Our approach isn't just identifying violations, it's helping organizations build cultures where compliance is a strategic advantage rather than a cost center to minimize. Approval was unanimous. Within weeks, we were expanding my team to 6 analysts and developing a consulting division for portfolio companies needing compliance infrastructure development. That afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Donald Ashford. We've implemented the structural changes you recommended. Hired a chief compliance officer reporting directly to me and staffed her team appropriately. The cultural shift has been remarkable. Your impact extended far beyond audit resolution. If you're ever interested in returning, my door is open. I deleted the email without responding. My answer was already visible in industry publications announcing Harbor Ridge's expansion and my role leading it. 6 months after my termination, I spoke at the same Portland conference where I'd met Eleanor. This time, not as an overworked solo practitioner but as Chief Compliance Officer leading a growing team, presenting our framework for building effective compliance cultures. In the audience sat Colton and Vertex's new CCO. Their expressions as I detailed our success told me everything. They understood they'd lost more than institutional knowledge, they'd lost the future I was building elsewhere. After my presentation, attendees swarmed with questions and cards. Among them was Amelia Chin, Vertex's new CCO, who waited until others dispersed. Your framework is impressive, she acknowledged. Very sophisticated. Built on solid foundations, I replied. The documentation was always there if anyone had read it. I know. I've spent 6 months discovering everything you tried to tell them. She paused. You saved them even while leaving. Most people wouldn't have. As I gathered my materials, she added quietly, they track your success obsessively now. Every speaking engagement. Every client win. Every industry publication mentioning you. And there was. Not their failure but my success. Not their loss but my gain. Every achievement at Harbor Ridge reminded them of what they'd dismissed. That evening, Sophie called after her midterms. Aunt Kier, you sound incredible. Like genuinely happy. He was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of an entire function on my shoulders alone. I was building something sustainable instead of desperately maintaining something broken. You know what, Sophie? Sometimes the best revenge isn't making others fail. It's succeeding so completely they can't ignore what they threw away. 1 year after my termination, Harbor Ridge promoted me to Senior Vice President of Regulatory Strategy. My team had grown to 12 specialists. Our consulting division was generating $8 million annually. 3 portfolio companies had successfully exited at premium valuations, partly because our compliance infrastructure made them attractive to acquirers. The professional recognition was gratifying, but the personal satisfaction ran deeper. I'd built exactly the compliance function I'd always envisioned. Properly staffed. Adequately resourced. Actually valued for strategic insight rather than merely tolerated as regulatory overhead. At my promotion celebration, Eleanor raised her glass. To Kira, who proved that expertise properly valued creates exponentially more impact than expertise merely exploited. The team cheered. These people understood what I brought to the table. Not because they'd watched me prevent disasters, but because they'd collaborated with me to build frameworks that prevented disasters from occurring in the first place. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn message from Lydia at Vertex. Congratulations on the promotion. Amazing to see how far you've come. Things are better here now with proper staffing, but everyone knows you laid the foundation we're building on. Hope you're proud of what you created. I was proud. Not of what I'd created at Vertex, that had been survival architecture built under impossible constraints, but proud of what I was building at Harbor Ridge. What we were building together as a team that valued each member's contributions. The next morning I arrived at our expanded offices in a new building with better views. My corner office had space for my growing collection of regulatory reference materials and a window overlooking Puget Sound. Hannah knocked on my open door. Morning, boss. The new analysts start today. Ready for orientation? I smiled. Absolutely. Let's make sure they know from day one that their expertise matters and their concerns will be heard. He grinned. Completely different philosophy from some places. Learned from experience, I replied. Both what to do and what never to do. That afternoon I sat with our 4 new hires, recent law school graduates eager to launch compliance careers. They looked at me with that mixture of nervousness and excitement that I remembered from my own beginning. Welcome to Harbor Ridge, I said. Before we dive into frameworks and regulations, I want to establish something foundational. Your expertise matters here. When you identify risks or see problems, you speak up. We listen. We may not always agree with your assessment, but we always take it seriously. One of them, a sharp young woman named Casey, raised her hand hesitantly. What if we're wrong? I'm worried about looking stupid. I leaned forward. Being wrong occasionally is part of learning. Being silent when you see potential problems is far more dangerous. I'd rather investigate 10 false alarms than miss one real issue because someone was afraid to speak up. They relaxed visibly. This wasn't the culture they'd expected in financial services. Over the following months, my team continued expanding our impact. We developed compliance frameworks for emerging fintech sectors, published white papers that became industry references, spoke at conferences across the country. The most satisfying moments weren't awards or applause. They were seeing my team succeed. Derek confidently presenting a risk assessment that saved a portfolio company. Priya catching a regulatory gap that prevented a multimillion-dollar mistake. Casey just months in flagging a licensing issue no one else saw. These wins proved what I'd always believed. Real compliance isn't about one hero holding everything together. It's about building systems where knowledge is shared, expertise is valued, and no single person is the only thread keeping it all from unraveling. 18 months after my termination, I was invited to keynote a national compliance conference, building resilient compliance functions in growing organizations. I accepted immediately. The irony wasn't lost on me. Everything I'd be teaching was what I'd begged Vertex to adopt for 3 years. They'd learned, but only after collapsing under the weight of their own neglect. Others didn't have to make the same mistake. The room was packed, hundreds of professionals who looked exactly like I once did. Exhausted, isolated, dismissed. How many of you are the only compliance person at your company? Nearly half raised their hands. How many have been told compliance matters, but never get budget or support? More hands. Laughter, bitter and knowing. How many have flagged risks and been called too cautious or not a team player? Almost everyone. I've been there, I said. I held an entire framework together with sheer will. I worked nights, weekends, holidays, ignored, underpaid, watching less qualified people climb while I kept the ship from sinking. The room went silent. I'm here to tell you 3 things. 1, you're not crazy. This system is broken by design and it's not your fault. 2, it doesn't have to be this way. Companies do value compliance. I work at one now. 3, your expertise has immense worth. If your employer won't see it, someone else will. I spent the next hour sharing how to build real infrastructure, documenting knowledge, communicating risk, advocating for resources, not as a burden but as strategy. And I spoke about walking away. About recognizing when an organization's values are toxic, when staying becomes self-betrayal. About knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, professionals flooded the networking area, eager to connect. One woman, late 40s, waited until the crowd thinned. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I've been solo compliance at a regional bank for 7 years. Thought I was failing. You just showed me the setup was impossible." "You're not failing," I told her. "You're being set up to fail by leaders who don't understand what they're asking. That's on them. Not you." Tears welled. "I'm updating my resume tonight." 2 years after my termination, a package arrived from Amelia Chin, Vertex's new CCO. Inside was her handwritten note. "We passed our latest state audit with commendations. Built a team of 5 using the frameworks you created. Gregory and Colton are gone. New leadership understands what you tried to tell them. This success is built on your foundation. Thank you for not letting us destroy ourselves completely." Attached was the audit report, glowing, thorough, filled with praise for the very systems I'd designed during those long, underpaid nights. They'd finally staffed properly, resourced adequately, and treated compliance as strategic. 2 years too late for me, but better late than never. I forwarded it to my team. "This is what happens when organizations learn to value expertise. They succeed. You're not being difficult, you're being right." Priya replied instantly, "Proof one person shouldn't have to build it all alone. Imagine what you could have created there with real support." He was right. That potential was lost to short-term thinking. Their loss. Harbor Ridge's gain. That afternoon I met with Crest Financial, a fast-growing startup with zero compliance infrastructure. The CEO admitted they knew the stakes. I laid it out. Building strong compliance isn't expensive. It's cheaper than failure. The biggest mistake? Treating compliance as a checkbox instead of core strategy. They agreed immediately. "Hire a dedicated officer now, scale smartly and listen." 3 months later they hired Casey, one of our own junior analysts I'd mentored. At her farewell lunch she smiled. "Somehow I don't think they'll ignore me like some companies did you." "They won't," I said. "I made sure of that." Later that week an unknown number called. Ronald Hastings, the new CEO of Vertex. He'd spent months uncovering the truth. "I'm calling to apologize," he said. "You were exploited. You deserved better. Your experience is now a case study here, on how not to treat expertise." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was closure. Validation. The next morning I told Eleanor. For years I wondered if I was overreacting. No. I know I was the solution they found inconvenient, until it was gone. 3 years post-termination, Harbor Ridge went public. Our compliance framework was highlighted in the prospectus as a competitive advantage. At the IPO dinner, the CEO toasted us. Kira Wallace and her team proved regulatory excellence isn't a cost center. It's a strategic differentiator that creates shareholder value. My equity vested at over $2 million. But more than that, I had built something sustainable, where expertise was heard, valued, and never taken for granted. I sat with the question for a moment. I would have left sooner. I spent 3 years trying to fix a situation that couldn't be fixed from my position. Organizations don't change because individuals work harder. They change when leadership decides to change. I should have recognized that earlier and moved to where my expertise would be valued. That evening, Derek pulled me aside at the after-party. "Everything you've taught us, it's not really about compliance. It's about organizational health. Respecting expertise. Listening when someone sees a problem. Compliance is just the lens," I replied. "The consequences are measurable. You can't bullshit your way through a federal audit." Priya joined us. "We're trained to spot risk. Turns out, organizational dysfunction is just another kind." Hannah raised her glass. "To Kira, who taught us that knowing your worth isn't difficult, it's professional." We clinked glasses. Around us, people celebrated the IPO, but we were celebrating something deeper. The validation of building something meaningful together. 4 years after my termination, I returned to keynote the National Compliance Conference. From crisis to culture. The room was packed. My reputation had grown. People wanted to know how we'd done it. I didn't just talk about success. I talked about Vertex, how their failure to value compliance nearly destroyed them, and how that very failure created the opportunity for me to build something better. Organizational dysfunction creates opportunity, I said. When a company refuses to value your expertise, others are watching. They see what you're worth. The real question is, do you have the courage to leave? Afterward, a young compliance officer approached, exhausted. I'm the only one on my team. 3 years, no support, constant crisis. How did you know when to go? You've explained the problem clearly, I told her. They understand. But your efforts make their neglect tolerable. The question isn't whether they'll change. It's whether you'll accept being exploited forever. Tears welled. I thought I was being disloyal. Loyalty is two-way. You don't owe them your health or your future. Update your resume tonight. Network tomorrow. And when you get an offer from a place that values you, don't hesitate. Just go. 6 months later, she messaged, Senior Compliance Officer now. Stress down 50%. Salary up 60%. I wake up excited. Thank you for giving me permission to value myself. Messages like hers became common. Each one reminded me that my story wasn't just about me, it was about changing a culture. 5 years post-termination, I published The Compliance Paradox, a bestseller that named the silent crisis so many face, being indispensable yet undervalued. On tour, I met leaders who finally understood, compliance isn't a cost center. It's strategic infrastructure. I showed them the model. Listen, resource, respect. At a Boston talk, a CEO admitted, we're making the same mistakes. One person doing the job of 4. How do we fix it? Do you actually want to fix it? I asked. Or just feel better? I want to fix it. Then hire the team. Pay market rate. Make compliance a board priority. Act on risks immediately. Or keep paying the price later, in fines, fallout, and failure. He nodded. Penny wise and pound foolish. Most are. Until they learn the hard way. You can learn now. Take it. Eleanor, now Harbor Ridge's CEO, smiled over dinner. You're a folk hero. The one who walked away and built something better. Not a hero, I said. Just someone who finally demanded to be valued. In this field. She raised her glass. That's revolutionary. To revolution, I echoed. The quiet kind, where people simply refuse to settle. 6 years later, Vertex invited me back, not to beg but to speak. Their lobby was calmer, their team larger, healthier. Amelia introduced me. Kira built the foundation we now stand on. During Q&A, a junior analyst asked, knowing what happened, would you do anything differently? I walked into Vertex 6 years after they'd cast me out, invited to speak about building resilient compliance. A young analyst asked how I'd handle things differently. I would have left sooner, I said. You can't fix a broken system from the bottom. Sometimes the only solution is walking away and letting leadership feel the weight of their choices. Afterward, team members thanked me, acknowledging my warnings had become their roadmap. That felt good. Better was seeing them thrive in a place that valued them, somewhere I'd never have to watch another expert burn out like I did. I paused in the lobby where I'd once walked out with a box of belongings. That moment had felt like an ending. It was the beginning. A security guard nodded. Have a good afternoon, Ms. Wallace. You too, I said, stepping into the spring light. My phone buzzed. Eleanor. Board meeting moved up. Need your input. I smiled. The good kind of work was waiting. 7 years on, I stood at my Harbor Ridge office window. 18 professionals now carried our mission forward. Our consulting arm brought in $25 million. Former analysts led compliance at major firms, spreading the culture we built. Sophie called, writing her dissertation. Your story's textbook organizational behavior, she said. That evening, Gregory Vance, the man who fired me, called. Retired. Humbled. I didn't see what you were worth, he admitted. We created the very crisis we accused you of causing. That failure was ours. His apology settled something deep. Closure I hadn't known I needed. The next morning, Hannah burst in. Vertex is launching the Kira Wallace Excellence in Compliance Award. Named after you. Amelia called moments later. It's unanimous. Will you accept it? I thought of every silent, overworked professional still clinging to hope. Yes. If my name helps others be seen, then it means something. When news broke, messages flooded in. One stood out, from the woman I'd once told to leave her toxic job. You showed us that demanding respect isn't difficult. It's professional. 8 years after my termination, Eleanor announced our firm would train the industry. Then came the final honor, an invitation to the National Advisory Board. Priya grinned. Not bad for someone fired for working weekends. I laughed. Best career move I never planned. Driving home, I sent one last message to that young professional who'd once doubted herself. Your expertise has value. Work where it's seen. Never settle. Because sometimes the most powerful statement isn't revenge. It's building a legacy so undeniable, the people who discarded you are forced to honor it. And that's justice.